morning, brothers and sisters.
Good morning.
It is wonderful to be here. Romans chapter 15, verse 4 says, "Whatsoever things were written aforetime were written for our learning." Let's go now to the Old Testament and see if the church in the 21st century can learn something from the church in the wilderness. Our text is Numbers 13. And Israel had just probably a year and a half, no more than 2 years, had been delivered from Egyptian bondage by the mighty hand of God. And his miracles were unmistakable and undeniable. These were 10 plagues that he brought about in order to have Pharaoh release the children of Israel from bondage. They had been slaves for 430 years. That's a long time. They were oppressed, they were afflicted, they were mistreated, and God miraculously delivered them from that Egyptian bondage. And now they're ready to spy out the land which the Lord himself had promised to give them. So we'll start in Numbers 13. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them." And now let's pick up down in verse 17. Then Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said to them, "Go up this way into the south, and go up to the mountains, and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, and whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, whether there are forests there or not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit of the land." Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. This would have been most likely sometime around August that this is happening. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. And they went up through the south and came to Hebron, Ammon, Sheshai, and Talmon. The descendants of Anak were there. Now, Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there they cut down a branch with one of the clusters of grapes, and they carried it between two of them on a pole. They also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down there. And they returned from spying out the land after 40 days. So this was quite a reconnaissance mission, wasn't it? 40 days in length. Now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation, showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him and said, "We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit." So the saying "flowing with milk and honey" is a metaphor for incredible abundance. This land is rich and fruitful and has incredible abundance, unbelievable abundance. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Verse 28, "Nevertheless." Now, whenever you hear "nevertheless," that's a big word for "but." It also can mean "in spite of all this that we have said." Nevertheless, so far they're doing really good on their report. Here we go, verse 28. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there, and these were reputed to be giants. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people. They're getting a little worked up now because of this nevertheless stuff. Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." How in the world can he say that? How can he be so confident? Well, let's go back to 13 verse 2. Send men out. This is the Lord speaking to Moses, and he says, "Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the children of Israel." So Caleb has faith in the word of God and in the character of God, that God will honor his word. And God is going to give them this land of Canaan, flowing with milk and honey. That's why he's a faith-filled leader. And that's why he says, "Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it." Why, Caleb? We have God with us. God is giving us this land. That's where Caleb's at. That's not where the rest of these folks are. But, verse 31, the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able." Where are they at? Where are they looking at? Where's their focus? Where's their concentration? "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." Well, who are you serving? Who has brought you out of the bondage of Egypt? This is incredible. Verse 32, they didn't stop there. They gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land, an evil report, a negative report, a very pessimistic report, which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants." Is there a little exaggeration there, do you think? Just a little bit. "It's a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak come from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight." Do we see a problem here with this report? Knowing Jehovah God, whom they are serving. Knowing Jehovah God, who has been with them for all this time, delivered them out of the bondage of Egypt, parted the Red Sea, sustained them through the wilderness for this last 1.5 to 2 years. Now, chapter 14, verse 1. What is the impact? What is the result of this negativity, of this pessimism, of this severe lack of faith? "So all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night. And all the children of Israel complained." They murmured. I talk about that in the bulletin article this week. They murmured, they complained against Moses and Aaron, and the whole congregation said to them, "If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we had died in this wilderness." That's a terrible thing to say. That's a slap in the face. They're slapping the Almighty in the face. Not only Moses and Aaron, but they're slapping the Almighty in the face. He's the one who delivered them out of the bondage of Egypt with a mighty hand. It gets even worse. Verse 3. "Why has the Lord brought us to this land, to fall by the sword, that our wives and children should become victims? Would it not be better for us to return to Egypt?" Wow! That is really bad. Really, really, really bad. Not only are they expressing their discontent and their frustration with Moses and Aaron, they are charging the Almighty with improper motives. And they're charging the Almighty, the great God of Israel, Jehovah God, with wrongdoing. That is not good. Not good. So, why did the 10 give the report they gave? Why didn't they all give the report Caleb gave? Why didn't they all say, we can go in and do this? We are able to do this. Why didn't they say that? Why did they say, we are not able to do this? We can't. Can't do it. So this morning I'd like to submit to you 3 reasons why these men gave the answers they did, the 10 spies. Why they said, we are not able, because there's a very valuable lesson for us to learn in this. And as we look at these reasons, I want us to do some introspection. I want us to do some serious soul searching, some self-examination, some honest self-examination. And as we identify the reasons why these men answered the way they did and why they gave the report that they did, I want us to see if perhaps we too aren't guilty sometimes of this type of thinking, of this pessimism, this negative thinking, this lack of faith. And if we are guilty, I want to offer a solution that will help us to overcome this type of attitude, this thinking. The first point is this. These men had forgotten what God had already done for them, obviously. They had forgotten what God had already done. As was already mentioned, they had been brought out of the bondage of Egypt by the mighty hand of God. It was His doing, not them. It was God's doing. God had miraculously brought them through the Red Sea, and before that He had miraculously brought about these 10 plagues on Egypt. It's interesting when you read commentaries how a lot of your liberal commentators try to make these natural phenomenon, like the water turning to blood. How is that natural phenomenon anywhere you go? It's not. But it's interesting that they try so hard. But these 10 plagues were all miracles brought about by God. And then the parting of the Red Sea, they crossed as on dry land, the scripture says. And then when the Egyptians followed them in, they tried to do it. What did God do? Remember Cecil B. DeMille's 1956 movie? It's phenomenal. He did a great job. That's 1956, the special effects. But it gives you the idea. When the Egyptians tried to go in, these walls of water come in, drown them all. It's amazing. God led the Israelites by a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. He provided food. He provided manna. Then they complained that this manna is we're getting tired of this manna. So then God gives them quail. They complained about that. God says, I'm going to give you so much quail, it's going to come out your nostrils. The God's, beginning to lose his patience with them. Not only that, they complain, we don't have any water. We're going to die of thirst. God brings water in the desert from a rock. All these miracles, and plus, their clothes did not wear out. The whole time they're wandering in the desert, their clothes didn't wear out. God is providing for them. He's protecting them every step of the way. And yet, they can say this. This is just unbelievable. They obviously still, after all God had done for them, they still were not truly thankful. They weren't grateful for all that God had done for them. And even the Lord expresses his amazement at their unbelief and their ingratitude in Numbers 14, verse 11. Then the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people reject me? And how long will they not believe me with all the signs which I have performed among them? Makes you scratch your head. They had witnessed these miracles of God. They had witnessed his power, his mighty power. They had gone through the Red Sea as it parted. It just defies all imagination. So clearly Israel was not appreciative of God's great love. He was so long-suffering with them. Long-suffering. His tremendous love, his mercy, his compassion, his providential care. So they weren't thankful. And going back to chapter 13, verses 1 and 2, he's saying, this land which I will give to the children of Israel. I am giving to the children of Israel. They had really no reason to doubt that God wouldn't follow through with what he said he would do. That's a severe lack of faith. So God had already promised the land to them. All they had to do was go in and take it. That's what they had to do. But they said, we are not able. We can't do it. Maybe even we won't do it. Maybe that's what they're saying. So they weren't giving the Almighty credit for being able to do what he had promised them he would do. That is a slap in the face. Not good. Now let's think about ourselves. Do we give God credit for being able to do what he tells us he will do in his word? Let's take a look at this. That he will never leave you or forsake you. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. Do we believe that? That he'll take your anxieties and burdens upon himself. Psalm 55:22. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. And many other scriptures. That he'll provide a way of escape in time of temptation. We have that promise. That he'll provide for your every need. Philippians 4:19 is one place there that says that. That he'll hear and answer your every prayer. Now the answer may not be what we may want, but God hears our prayers and answers our prayers. That he loves us, that he forgives us, that he has prepared an eternal home for us in heaven. That he's with us every step of the way in this life. Do we believe this? Now the even more important question, and perhaps more difficult question, do we act like we believe it? It's one thing to say, yeah, I believe everything you just said, but do we act it? Is it translated into our daily lives? So these 10 spies had apparently forgotten some things. Let us not forget God's many tremendous blessings. Let us be truly grateful. Let us count our blessings and be truly thankful for all that God has done and continues to do for us. The second point is that these spies wanted to take the easy way out. That's what it seems. They wanted to take the easy way out. You know, electricity has an inherent characteristic that was shared by the Israelites in this case, and I fear sometimes by us as well. Electricity always takes the path of least resistance. If you think about it, so does water. When water runs, it will always take the path of least resistance. It always takes the easy way out. Now, in verse 2 of chapter 13, God says, this land which I am giving to the children of Israel. God is giving it to them. And as I mentioned before, all they had to do, with God's help and under his supervision and guidance, was go in and take it. That was their part. Would it be tough? Yeah, it would be tough. Would it require hard work? Yeah, it would be hard. Much effort would have to be expended, no doubt, and it would demand sacrifice. It would not be easy, probably. But these guys wanted to take the path of least resistance, the easy way out. So they said, we are not able to do this. We can't do it. And then the excuses came. I sometimes try to justify excuses by calling them reasons. These aren't excuses, they're just reasons, but a lot of times they're still excuses. And in the same way, I'll try to justify my complaining by saying, I'm just stating facts. I'm not complaining, I'm just stating facts. But a lot of time, you know what? It's complaining. It's complaining. Rose by any other name, right? God knows our heart, he knows our attitude. So let's look at what this type of counterproductive, negative thinking caused. What was the result of the report of these 10 spies? It spread like a contagious disease among the people, didn't it? it spread throughout the congregation, the whole congregation of Israel. Remember, it started with 10 spies, 10 people. You see that they were wishing that they could have taken the easy way out by just staying in Egypt in the first place. Was it good for them in Egypt? No, it wasn't good for them in Egypt. What are they talking about? We would have been better off to stay in Egypt. Let's go back to Egypt. What are you talking about? You were in bondage for 430 years there. You were oppressed. You were afflicted. You were mistreated. You were slaves there. What are you talking about? Well, they were also charging God foolishly, weren't they? They were charging the Almighty with wrongdoing, with improper motives. They were blaming God for their predicament. Good thing we never do that, right? So verse 9 indicates that they were in fact rebelling against God. Verse 9 in chapter 14. Only do not rebel against the Lord. That's what Joshua and Caleb are saying, admonishing them not to rebel against the Lord. So much of the time, what looks like the easy way is the wrong way. The easy way is often not a good way, is it? The Israelites were tempted to go back to Egypt where they were better off. Were they better off in Egypt? No. Anybody can see that. That was a deception of Satan. That's what he does. He is the father of lies. He is the deceiver. And they're believing this stuff themselves, so it's a little bit of self-deception there. And Satan works the same today. When things get rough in our Christian walk, when our faith begins to cost us something and demand some sacrifice, we much of the time, like the Israelites, are saying, you know what? I was better off before I even became a Christian. I didn't have these kind of problems before I became a Christian. That's deception. That's Satan at work. We don't want to go there. The path of least resistance, brothers and sisters, is seldom worth taking. It's seldom worth going that way. As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, I'm going to turn there. Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Jesus said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it." Why is that? Because it takes no effort. It's easy street. What's he say? He says, wide is the gate and broad is the way. It's easy to go that way. It's easy to follow the crowd. It takes no effort. But he's saying enter by the narrow gate, because the narrow gate, verse 14, is the gate, narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. So, why? Why are there few who find it? Because it's not easy. It's not the path of least resistance. So what about us when we're faced with major decisions or problems or challenges or responsibilities? Do we sometimes tend to take the path of least resistance? Do we sometimes seek to take the easy way out? Let's be honest with ourselves. These things are written, Paul says, for our learning. May we never be guilty of rationalization. No, we can rationalize anything away. Or self-justification, justifying some of the wrong decisions we may make or justifying the wrong things that we do. So these men took the easy way out simply by saying, we are not able, we can't do it. The third point is they were walking by sight and not by faith. Now there's a few verses in the New Testament quoting the Old Testament that we are to walk by faith and not by sight. Hebrews 11:1 tells us faith is the substance, the evidence of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, or the evidence of things not seen. Faith is the essence of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. 2 Corinthians 5:7 tells us, for we walk by faith and not by sight. What does that mean? What does walking by faith mean? Walking by faith means we are trusting and depending on God. Not in ourselves. Not in man, not in science or technology or anything else. Walking by faith is we are trusting and depending on God. Is this where the Israelites were at? Surprisingly, no. They should have been. After all that God had shown them, all that God had done for them, and was continuing to do for them, they should have been right there, shouldn't they? Romans 1:17 tells us the just, those who are righteous, followers of God, shall live by faith. They shall live, they shall behave and conduct themselves by trusting in God and depending on Him to meet their needs, satisfying their wants and their needs. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, without this kind of trust and dependence, it is impossible to please Him, for he that cometh to God must believe that He is, and that He is a rewarder of them that diligently seek Him. Must believe that He is. Not only believe that He is, but that He will do what He says He will do. One definition of faith that we use a lot is taking God at His word. Right? So if God says, I am giving, go into the land of Canaan, which I am giving to you, God is making this commitment, He's making this promise. Why doesn't Israel believe it? That's a slap in the face. It's questioning God's the very integrity of God. Not a good place to be. So these folks definitely did not take God at His word. Let's look closely at what they said. Verse 28, nevertheless, but in spite of all the good that's in the land of Canaan, flowing with milk and honey, then the excuses came, didn't they? Verse 31, we are not able, we can't do it. More excuses. More excuses. Not content with that, they brought forth an evil report, a bad report, a negative, pessimistic report, complete with gross exaggerations. Verses 32 and 33. Is there any doubt that these men were walking by sight and not by faith? It's almost like they're leaving God completely out of the picture, right? It's all up to us. We can't do this. Those people are giants. They're big. We're like grasshoppers in their sight. Cities are large and fortified. We can't do this. Well, where's God in all this to these guys? They seem to think it was all up to them. And that God was unable, or maybe even worse, unwilling to do what He had already promised them He would do. That's where faith comes in. They did not take God at His word. They didn't trust in God, which is amazing because of all that they had seen God do for them. But before we come down too hard on them, let's again take a look at ourselves. Are we walking by faith? Or are we walking by sight most of the time? Do we take God at His word? Are we trusting in God, or am I trusting in only what I can do, or what I can pull off? Do you see yourself at all reflected in the attitudes or the thinking of these men, these 10 spies? Have you been guilty perhaps of making excuses, maybe exaggerating the facts as to why you can't do something in God's service? So these 10 spies gave the answer they did because they had forgotten what God had already done for them. Maybe some of us have forgotten what God has done for us. They tried to take the path of least resistance. They always tried to take the easy way out. That's seldom the best way. It's seldom the right way. And they walk by sight and not by faith. And we want to really examine ourselves and see if we are maybe doing that somewhat ourselves. And what would be the result if we were to persist in negative, unproductive thinking? Well, seeing how God dealt with the Israelites in this instance, I think will provide us with a very sobering answer. In verse 12 of chapter 14, we read that God wanted to strike them with pestilence and disinherit them. That's what God wanted to do. Wow, that is powerful. God is not happy with this people. Well, they're insinuating that he has brought them out into the desert to kill them, and that he won't honor his commitment, won't honor his promises. They're insulting and assaulting the very character and nature of God. Yeah, he's angry. This is not a good thing. But Moses intercedes for the people, and so that didn't happen. What did happen is found in Numbers 14, beginning of verse 26. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "How long shall I bear with this evil congregation who complain against me, murmur, 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 grumble, 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 time and time again? I have heard the complaints which the children of Israel make against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, just as you have spoken in my hearing, so I will do to you. The carcasses of you who have complained against me shall fall in this wilderness, all of you who are numbered according to your entire number from 20 years old and above, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun." Those were the two that gave the positive, faith-filled report. "You shall by no means enter the land which I swore I would make you dwell in, but your little ones, whom you said would be victims, I will bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised," which you have rejected, which you didn't think worthy of going in and fighting for, that I was giving you. Wow. "But as for you," verse 32, "your carcasses shall fall in this wilderness, and your sons shall be shepherds in the wilderness 40 years, and bear the brunt of your infidelity until your carcasses are consumed in the wilderness, according to the number of the days which you spied out the land, 40 days. For each day you shall bear your guilt 1 year, namely 40 years, and you shall know my rejection. I, the Lord, have spoken this. I will do so to all this evil congregation who are gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall be consumed, and there they shall die." Wow. That is a scathing rebuke and a fairly harsh judgment, but a just judgment. It's unbelievable. It really is. So we see that their unbelief, their total lack of trust and faith in God, their ingratitude, kept them from entering into the promised land. And as 1 Corinthians 10, 11 and 12 says, "Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition." That's you and me. We need to learn something from this. We can definitely learn something from this, so we don't make the same mistakes that they did. They were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. Therefore, let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. So we want to take that to heart, don't we? We definitely need to learn a lesson from this. So, some questions. Have you forgotten what God has done for you? Are you letting that slip? Are you perhaps taking some things for granted, regarding some things lightly perhaps? Are you taking the path of least resistance a lot of the time, taking the easy way out? Are you thinking that you were somehow better off back in the world? Remember, that's a deception. That's a deception of the evil one. Are you walking by faith, or are you walking by sight? Are you depending on God, or are you depending on what you can do and what you know? Are you guilty of negative, unproductive thinking, perhaps? Are you willing to change? Or better yet, are you willing to let God change you, to mold you and conform you and shape you into the image of His Son? Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and Romans chapter 8, verse 29. It's up to each one of us to seriously consider how we answer these questions. We know what the truth is, and God knows. God knows us better than we know ourselves. And may God help all of us to make the right decision, and may He give us all the strength and the mental fortitude to do what needs to be done, what we need to do to bring our lives into conformity and to harmony with His will. If you're subject to the invitation this morning, if you have a need, if we can help you in any way, please come forward and make your request known as we stand and sing.